Hi folks, Dr. Don. This is the Monday video, which I'm actually recording here on Wednesday morning. Life happens to everyone, so we just got to keep plugging on. This is inside the Canvas course, Module 5 Learning Pathway. And I wanted to start with this graphic that we shared before, and it talks about the overall process of how we make inference, how we come up with conclusions about the real world using data. And again, we take, in this case, the green area there is the overall population. We take a sample because for whatever reason it's not practical, economical to get the data on every single thing in the population. Produce this data, which we call a sample. We do the exploratory data analysis, which you've done the last part of the course, module 3 and 4. But in here, in this sample, we said that we had 2,089 responses, 41% of which approved. So the question is, can we conclude that, in this case, this was back when President was Obama, that his performance rating was 41% plus or minus 2.1, which is what you normally see on the news. And we want to know if they're really that confident so we can conclude that. That's the general process that we'll be going through. And we've got 4 components this time. We've got our learning materials, which again you should review before attempting the assignments. And then we've got the rehearses, same thing. Try to get your initial submission in by Thursday night with a good faith effort on the first rehearse at least. If you can get them all done, that's great, you're finished. But if not, then you've got to get them all done and in by Sunday midnight. We've got a tips and tricks discussion again, no essay type discussion this time, and we've got a remix. This label, estimation and conference intervals, that name is a little bit incomplete. Again, what I like to do is when I get ready to start working, go ahead and open up the lab manual, and then I open up all the relevant pages. This time I've got the overview because I think it's important that you actually think about this. And we're talking about how we estimate things, and we're going to get into hypothesis test, or more formally, the null hypothesis significance test. And we're not going to use the classical approach that you're required in most intro stats courses because that's overcomplicated. Statistics traditionally was created in most courses before we really had the power at our fingertips of computers. And so they had to simplify how you do the analysis, and they had to make a lot of assumptions and to create a lot of different tests. Let's see, is this it? Yeah. This is a link from that overview that shows you a decision tree if you're using traditional methods of hypothesis test, inference, how you decide which type of tests you need to run. And it kind of walks you through, and you can see there's a lot of things you got to think about. You know, all these various different types of tests, and you know, parametric versus non-parametric. I'm not going to get into details of that. And then once you've answered all these questions, follow this flow chart, you end up with a lot of the other different types of tests down here you might consider. And each one of these tests has assumptions about the distribution of the data that you've got to test that to see if it really qualifies. Very complicated. Students get very confused as to which test to run. For example, do we do a z-test or a t-test? Z distribution or a t distribution? And this is a decision. Do we know the standard deviation, sigma? Yes, no. Anyway, Dr. Downey very smartly said that's overcomplicating it. And in reality, he says there's just one test. And his approach is we calculate the sample statistics, which we call delta, whatever you care about, difference in means, the average, the median, the proportion, etc. And then we simulate the world using computers to simulate that world, to take our data and build a world that resembles that data so that we can simulate the entire population, and then ask our question of that simulated population to get our delta, and then we calculate the probability of getting that value, that delta, in that null world. It's the p-value. And then we decide if the delta is significant. That tells us whether or not we're going to reject the null hypothesis. So that's the basic process. We've got our rehearses as usual. The first one goes into the basics of bootstrapping. That's the way that we take our sample and resample and resample. It's called bootstrapping, pulling yourself up by your own boots, remember? And then we find the confidence intervals, and then really that's another way of doing a hypothesis test. Rehearse 2, we actually get into the more formal hypothesis test using the Downey method, and we use the Infer package. That's a very special package that allows us to use this Downey simplified method. And you just go through. We give you 2 example tests, difference in 2 means, and test for correlation. And then our remix, same as we've normally seen, it builds off the rehearse. In this case, it builds primarily off of rehearse 2, where we give you those 2 examples for the hypothesis test. And you just walk through, again, find the code, copy it there, and then follow the questions. And then there's 2 research questions. You pick one, okay? Pick one of the following questions to answer. Is there a difference in the mean obesity rate between metro and non-metro counties in Alabama? We give you the database. And then is there a correlation between the county's obesity rate and its inactivity, 2 quantitative variables? But you just pick one of those 2 in Module 5 that you have to answer. And you go through and answer which question, what type of test, and then you go through and follow it. And again, that would be in your POSIT Cloud or RStudio desktop. Now, one of the things I want to point out to you again is, when you start, remember your Lab 5 remix, you want to save it as your student name. And that's what I've done up here. When I've opened it, I just did the file, save as, and then saved it with my name replacing student name. And then the other thing I like to do before I really get going is make copies of these other 2 rehearses. You can see here, since I renamed the remix, I still have the original copy without any work in it. And I just go up here, select rehearse 1, for example, go to the gear and copy it, and it will suggest the name, and I've already done that. I'm not going to accept it. I'm just going to cancel. But that gives me 2 backup copies, so I don't have to worry if I totally screw up. Same basic process I've talked about. So that's a quick overview. Reach out if you have any problems. I'll be here trying to help.